value of all of the property in the world that's used to store wealth. So right now, if you're a wealthy individual and you wanted to give money to your grandchildren, you have a number of choices. You can either buy bars of gold, or you can buy ranches. You could buy blocks of Manhattan or buildings. You can buy shares of companies, corporate stocks. You could put money in a savings account and maybe buy sovereign debt or bonds, corporate bonds or other bonds. And when you add up all this stuff, it's like $500 trillion worth of stuff that people use. And the challenge with all these things is how do I know if I had $1 million today that it would still be worth $1 million 100 years from now?
$1 million in buying power, if you would, yes?
Yeah. Money is economic energy.
Yes.
And so I want to have a certain share of economic energy in the civilization, and I want to maintain it for a long time, for generations. So if I buy a city block in Manhattan, it's kind of intuitive that over 200 years, the value of that city block will go up. And if more people move into Manhattan, it'll go up. And so the positives are people move in the city, and I got a share of the economic activity of the city. The negatives are it's going to get taxed by the mayor of Manhattan. There's going to be zoning regulation by the neighborhood zoning board. It's going to get potentially taxed by the state of New York. It might be the politician decides they really want to build Central Park on my block of land, and they just take it from me and they pay me, sub-market, or maybe they want to turn my land into an airport or into a port. So you own property. It sounds really good, but you have to fight to maintain that property over 100 years, and your children's children will have to fight to maintain it. So if I took $1 million of economic value in 100 years ago, and I held it in dollars, the U.S. dollar is expanding about 7% a year for the past 100 years. So If you do the math, you find that you lose 99% of the economic value in cash. And that's why nobody in their right mind would put $1 million of cash in a box and put a time lock on it, and in the year 2120 expect their great-grandchildren to open the box and for it to be worth anything. It will be worth nothing.
Sure.
If I put $1 million of gold in a box, 100 years from now, the challenge is, will the bank or the government seize the gold? Pretty much every country on earth stole everybody's gold over the last 100 years. If you had it in Germany, it got stolen multiple times. The British, the French, the Japanese, the Russians, even the Americans stole everybody's gold. So, and if it didn't get stolen, that's what we call counterparty risk, seizure, confiscation. If it didn't get stolen, if you increase the gold supply by 2% a year, then you realize the half-life of money in gold, that seems the half-life of energy in a battery. The half-life of money in gold is 35 years. Stop the gold miners from mining gold. So ultimately, the economic energy stored in the container of gold is dissipating at 2 to 3% a year, which means you're going to cut it in half once, twice, 3 times, right? So you're going to be down to 12.5% of what you had, even if it doesn't get seized. So when you think about these things, you realize that gold doesn't really hold economic energy great. It just happens to be the best portable, non-sovereign way to move energy around.
And portable is I'm not going to pick up a ton of gold and move it someplace.
Yeah, it's semi-portable. You couldn't move $1 million of gold through an airport, but it's more portable than a building, right? You're not moving your building out of LA ever. Right. So you've got this conundrum, which is things that hold their value for a long time, like soccer teams or football teams, maybe. Well, they have cultural risk. Will people still want to watch football and soccer in 100 years? And they're not so portable, and they're very political. Then you have things that look straightforward, like owning 1,000 acres of land. But if your enemy takes over as governor of the state, they just pass a property tax, so they tax your land away from you. And then the oldest cliche is lost the family farm because we couldn't pay the property taxes.
Sure.
So if you're a rich family in New York City and you have real estate, the reason that you still own it is because you rented it out and you were very competent in the way you manage the politics, the tax, and the rent, and you manage to get more rent than the tax. And then if you do that well, and if you get lucky, then you'll still have. But you know the families that keep their land for hundreds of years and use it to store wealth, and they never have it taxed away or taken away? You know who they are?
The dictators, the rulers, the kings.
The sovereigns.
Yes.
Okay, if you own the country, like let's say the Windsors, still own the middle of central London, but that's because they kind of own the government, or at least they're politically favored. Or if you go to the Middle East, you go to Dubai, you're a wealthy foreigner. You're like, I think I'll just buy a bunch of beachfront here. No. You're not. They don't sell the good property to foreigners. You have to be a royal in order to own the beach. So many countries, what you find is the sovereigns, they own the land forever in perpetuity and give it to their children's children's children. And the reason they can afford to do it is because there's no tax, because they make the tax laws. Digital gold, then it should replace gold. Gold's worth $10 trillion, and that takes Bitcoin to 500,000. But when you think of it as digital property, like replacing buildings and land and other long storeholds of wealth, then, you're up by a factor of 20 or 30 from there. I mean, it should not be. It's much better than digital gold because I can move Bitcoin at the speed of light and I can program it to 1 million transactions an hour on an iPhone or a website. You can't do that with gold. So it's got more utility than gold, which means it's probably worth 20 or 30 trillion if it just replaces the gold. But instead of buying the Fontainebleau Hotel, which is a nice hotel, worth whatever billions in Miami Beach, instead of buying the equivalent amount of Bitcoin, if you bought the Bitcoin, you can move that to any city in the world every hour of the day, compose it, decompose it, recompose it, dematerialize it, and when there's a nasty tax on it, you can just move yourself to a different jurisdiction where there's a better tax treatment. And if you think of it like that, then it's a multi-$100 trillion asset class. So at 10 trillion, it's 500,000. At 100 trillion, it's 5 million. So I think, we're marching toward $10 trillion, which is, $10 million a coin, which is why Bitcoin enthusiasts see it's just a very great long-term store of value. And it's a great investment idea because it meets the needs of 8 billion people. The average person, the middle-class person that drives an Uber or works as a dentist, they can't buy $387 worth of a building in New York City every month as their savings plan. Right. And a person in Africa can't buy a small share of a nice piece of property. They can't buy $127 worth of a Picasso painting. So Bitcoin offers property rights at any scale, any amount of money, anybody in the world.